Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Author Spotlight. This is Taj Deshawn, Vice President of Self-Publishing 30 Days, here today with a very special guest, Misty Buck. What's going on, Misty?
Hey, how are you? Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to have you here. For everybody listening on Thrive After Sports, I want you to understand something about Misty. We're not going to get too deep into the bio because I want Misty to tell her own story. But just so you know, Misty is a coach. She's an author of this wonderful book right here, Athlete Mental Health Playbook. This book has been tremendous for me. They say every coach needs a coach. As everybody knows, I work with former athletes. And over the years, especially recently, I really started to lean into reaching out to Misty for help. And Misty works with a lot of former athletes. Misty's been someone that I can confide in and just kind of talk about things that I wouldn't normally be comfortable talking about. And I actually started doing that before I even read Misty's book. But we'll get into all that in a second. Misty, can you please just give listeners a little bit of a background? Why is it that you decided to become a coach for athletes?
Right, that's a great question, and I love this. So I'll give a little synopsis of my story and kind of how I got to this point. So I'll start off by saying I'm actually not a licensed mental health professional. I didn't go to school and study psychology. I'm not licensed in it. I can't have a doctor in front of my first name, none of that. But I really got into this because this is something that I've lived through, and I feel that there is a place for, obviously, you definitely need your psychologist and your therapist and your psychiatrist, and you need that team as well. But sometimes you just need somebody who's been through it and they get you, and that's the spot that I come from. So basically, when I was growing up, I grew up around sports and around athletes, and my dad was a football coach for many years, and he actually, because we're in Miami, coached roller hockey because ice hockey wasn't a big thing, but we had a roller hockey league going for a little while here, and my brother played on that. And so anyway, so I was sort of always around that. I loved being on the sideline with him, and I was also a cheerleader, coached cheerleading for a little while as well. So it was really just sort of in the mix there, right? And even in my own household, I learned some of the principles that I learned on the field as well, right? So basically things that, it was a lot of tough love, a lot of, and I was always a very sensitive person, like right out the gate, probably from the day I was born. So that means I had a lot of emotions, a lot of feelings, and I didn't always know what to do with those, but I learned values like, if you cry, Missy, my brother might tease me, oh, stop being weak, Missy, you're so soft, Missy. Like those are sort of the things that I heard growing up. And so it's kind of like just this total, tough love, if you want to call it that, scenario where, you kind of, keep your emotions to yourself. Everyone has problems, that kind of a thing. And so what had ended up happening is that later in my teenage years in high school, I had gone through a tough period at home. My parents were getting divorced and I wasn't handling it so well. And I ended up in a period of a pretty serious depression. And so I worked my way through that. My parents, thank God, were very supportive. I think there came a point when, even though mental health wasn't something that was really spoken about at that time, and it was sort of, there was a lot more different stigmas around being in therapy and going to therapists. So it either meant that probably, at least in my experience, what I learned is that at that time, you're either really crazy or you're like some rich kid that's going to whine about problems, right? So it was like, no, like it wasn't normalized. It was just total, like one extreme or the other. And so anyways, but thank God I ended up getting the help that I needed, and I was able to work through that. And then in college and in my 20s, I started to deal with anxiety. I didn't know what it was at first. I would wake up with stomach aches every day before class, and I would have episodes where all of a sudden it was like I was out of nowhere, like I was panicking, and I didn't know what any of that was. And long story short, after all that, I ended up going through therapy and just really, really exploring on my own as well, mind, body, and soul, holistic approaches to changing my mindset, to changing ways about my life, reframing negative thinking patterns, changing this guilt that I had for having emotions in the first place, or that I'm feeling sorry for myself because I'm in a bad place. That just meant in my house, sometimes I meant I was feeling sorry for myself. That's what I was told. But so it wasn't, you know what I mean? It just was these things that you learned that you have to decondition. And I think a lot of people have that. And so anyhow, I ended up going out, starting my first business, which I still have today. It's a marketing agency. I started that when I was 26 back in 2008. And after a few years, I was like, man, like something's still missing here. And that was that I wanted to really help people. And so I got certified as a life coach. And then I started, then it's like, oh, okay, pick a niche, pick a niche, pick a niche. And a few years ago, it just sort of dawned on me, like, why don't I take my favorite experiences of being around sports and coaching and all that, and what I learned about mental health in that space, and help people who are in that, who have that, grew up in that same way, that have that same mindset, because I can't be the only one. And so I started writing this blog, and people started reaching out to me. Hey, like, that describes me. Like, that's exactly how I grew up. Like, yay, like somebody gets it, right? And so that turned into the book, which I published this year. And now obviously I'm doing coaching still, and that's where I'm at. That's sort of like the long, short story of how I got here.
Yeah, that's awesome, Misty. Thank you for sharing all that. And obviously there's so much to unpack. One of the things that I left out, for those of you who aren't watching on video, you can't see this, but the subtitle of the book, so it's called The Athlete Mental Health Playbook, but the subtitle is A Beginner's Guide to Mental Health, A Beginner's Guide to Mental Wellness for Athletes, because you're human, not a robot. You're human, not a robot. That was huge. And that's pretty evident in the work that you do and the content that you put out, in the way the book is structured, in your coaching. And something you touched on that I wanted to kind of go back to is how, when you were a kid, your brothers and your family, they would tell you, hey, you got to be tough. And
right.
That was something that I experienced in my childhood too. My mom would tell me, you're so sensitive, you're so sensitive all the time. And that forced me, okay, I have to be tough. Otherwise, I'm not going to be loved. And then obviously playing a sport like football only reinforces that.
Right.
And I think you and I, we touched on that the last time you were coaching me. And another thing you said that I really liked is that a lot of people may look at therapy as like, oh, that's only for rich kids who want to whine or whatever,
right.
Or especially in the Black community, right? Not that I speak on behalf of all Black folks, but from what I've seen, a lot of Black people, they feel like, at least in my family, like people who go to therapy are crazy, kind of like you said, right? So I'm glad you touched on that, because that stereotype or that stigma around mental health or therapy exists everywhere. But I want to get back into, you are already a business owner. You were already an entrepreneur around at the age of 26. You already had the marketing. Things were already booming. What was it that, like, obviously you wanted to work with people, but can you just take a deeper dive into kind of that pull and that call to be like, I want to help people, but how did you specifically identify I want to work with athletes?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I went back and forth for a while, right? Because it was like, you got to pick a niche, you got to pick a niche, you got to pick a niche. And I had taken different programs and webinars and spent like all this freaking money on like different people telling me how to set up my coaching business, right? And so, and I was all like, oh, pick a niche, it's got to come from your heart, it's got to come from your soul. And I kept trying these things, Taj, and I swear to you, it wasn't sticking. I would get super excited, because I'm the type of person that gets really excited by new ideas. So I'd get super excited. And then all of a sudden, like, the steam would just blow out, right? It would just go away. And I was like, man, like this isn't it. And so when I really, like, one day it started to dawn on me, and it really came to life actually when I was working with my own coach. I'll give a shout out to him real quickly here, Dre Baldwin. He's awesome. He's like on my coaching team, go-to guy there. So he was asking me, like, what are some things that stick out to you in your life? And it was sort of there all along, but I think the light bulb finally went off when it was like, okay, so two really pivotal things in my life. One is when I was a coach myself. That was my favorite thing that I ever did, even after opening my business, everything I've ever done in my life. And I was like 15 when I started coaching, and it was my favorite thing I ever did. So up until that point, right? And then the other thing was all the mental health stuff that I've been through. So it sort of like dawned on me, why don't I put them together? There's, like I was saying, there's got to be other people like me. And so that's how I ended up in this space. And it was like right before Kevin Love started, and DeMar DeRozan, and then Kevin Love followed with those Players Tribune's articles. And the conversation really started to take off.
Awesome. And then obviously after doing some coaching and helping and transforming lives, as you do so well, you decided, I'm going to write a book. So why the Athlete Mental Health Playbook? Yes. How did that come about? And like, what was the thought process behind writing the book?
So the truth of the matter is that when I was working with the coach, one of the things we were looking at is, okay, I need a lead magnet, right? So I was like, man, I have all these great blogs, and I feel like they're just sitting there and like, who's going to go through my site and start reading every single one of these blog articles? I know, I'll put them together in a PDF and I'll just offer them as a download on my site. And so that's what I did. And the name from the beginning was Athlete Mental Health Playbook. And then like last year, I thought, you know what, I can do better than this. And so I took the blogs that were there, I rewrote things, I expanded on things, I wrote exercises, and I had a friend introduce me to the idea of self-publishing on Amazon. And so that's where it just took off. It just took off from here. So
right.
That was sort of, and that was before, you know, I even knew about the services that you all were offering, although because I probably would have taken full advantage of that at the time. But this was sort of, you know, I had gone like completely rogue on this. But that's how the first book, there will be more, but that's how the first one came to be.
Hey, well, we can always work together. I'd be honored to work with you on your next book, Misty. That would be
we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it.
Yeah. So for all the authors or aspiring authors who listen to Author Spotlight, or anybody listening on Thrive After Sports who may be thinking about writing a book one day, like I love that you touched on, it started out just like as a lead magnet for your business, right? But then you start to see the snowball effect. And I'm seeing this with my book. Like, I'm like, this is a great business move. This is a great way to have impact. And then it almost takes on a life of its own, like you were describing, to where, yes, of course, business is growing, but also all these people are being touched by the book and you're having so much impact with it. I think that's amazing. And I like how you went on, you also talked about how it started out as just an ebook. And you're like, I want to have a physical copy. Like a lot of people don't understand having an ebook is great, but it's so easy to close the tab, right? A lot of people download ebooks, never look at them again. If you have a physical copy, me too. Sometimes
I do that. I'm the worst. I need to hold things and write in things, and I like to write notes, and I'm just who I am.
Exactly. And that's the whole point. Like, I can't close the tab on this book. Like, I can't just close it and not think about it. It's sitting on my shelf. It's sitting on my desk. So anytime I look at this book, I think of all of our, all the conversations we've helped me, or I think of all the information in the book. And speaking of that, you did such an awesome job of laying out, not just providing information, but encouraging active participation in the book. Like, I thought I did every single one of your exercises.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Like, was the exercises, is that kind of like some of the stuff that you do in your coaching, or how did you like strategically come up with, okay, at the end of each chapter, I'm going to have very strategic, intentional exercises? How'd you come up with those?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. So here's the thing. I think part of the thing when you're thinking of writing a book is knowing your audience. And I didn't make the book, like I have my own copy here. It's not very thick, right? It's under 100 pages. It's not like anything that's insurmountable. I didn't want it to feel clinical. I wanted it to feel interactive. I wanted it to be, because the number one thing that I hate is when I take a webinar, or I read a book, or I'm taking a class, or whatever it is, and I have no takeaway. Right? Like, people are telling me all this great information, but then I don't know how to apply it to actually make it work for myself. And so, and I think, having had those experiences were really helpful in this, because it led me to say, you know what, I need to do something in here to make it interactive. I want to keep people engaged, but I more than anything, I want, when they get this book, that they walk away with more knowledge of themselves, period. And that was the only way to do it. Like, I can say it to you all day long, but until you apply it yourself, that's how you learn, right? So
absolutely. Yeah. And I love the fact that it's not a clinical book. Like, as I'm reading it, I can almost hear it in your voice. Like, if it was a clinical book, like you said, you might be putting people to sleep. But because it's in your voice, because it's very relatable, even just the subtitle itself, because you're human, not a robot, like, that automatically speaks to people, I think. It has it like, okay, Misty gets it. Misty understands it. And then the fact that you're going through the exercises, like, allows the book to have even that much more of an impact.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. That was my point. That was the goal with it. So I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I wanted to ask you too, Misty, this is something I've been itching to ask you, is like, why do you think, because I love getting different people's opinions on this, especially people who work with athletes. Like, why do you think that athletes have, and I know you talk about this in the book, but why do you think athletes have such a difficult time seeking help, asking for help, showing weakness, all that kind of stuff?
I don't like to generalize, and I will preface this answer by saying that every single person is different, and I think that's what makes mental health, it can be a challenge, is because it is so personal, and there's so many layers to each individual in terms of your experiences, your beliefs, your values, all those things, right? And so that kind of creates how you view life and your perceptions and how you learn how to deal with emotions and those things. And it is so personal. So I don't want to generalize with this answer, but I will say that many of the athletes who I've worked with, and I will say majority of them, I'll go as far to say most of them are probably football players and basketball players and have been in these, and most are men in sort of these hyper-masculine locker rooms, if you will, where they've learned a few things. So they've learned at home, they've learned the value, maybe they've had a really tough home life, right? And so growing up, and they learned the same thing, that maybe there's no time to be weak, because we're always pushing, right? We always got to hustle, we got to like get like to the next goal. You're kind of always, actually I just posted a video about this the other day, you learn to always be in this survival mode, and peace, and actually learns to feel uncomfortable in peaceful times, right? Like sometimes that happens because you're like, whoa, wait, okay, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop now. Or so I think that, at least the athletes that I've worked with, not all of them, but many of them, they learned those values either at home or on the field or in on the court, where it was like, there's no time for this, for you to have feelings if you want to be competitive, because it's almost like you're like shark, like blood in the water. You smell like your opponent's going to smell weakness. And so if you want to stay competitive, you have to stay in sort of that what we call mental toughness. And I think that mental toughness is taught very well, but normalizing your emotions, and that mental wellness part is really, there's a gap there. Like people, I think, feel like they can't do both. It's like one or the other. I either have to be mentally tough or in my feelings and whatever. And it's not like that. You can live and still be tough and competitive and fearless and focused, and learn how to normalize your emotions and be like, okay, wait, what's going on here? Let me check in with myself. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that was great. No, you answered my question and then some. That was super solid advice right there. And I love that post that you put out the other day. And I love the newsletters that you've been putting out, especially the one
Thank
recently.
You.
The one about, like we do have that kind of go-getter mindset. And this is what our last coaching call was about when you were coaching me on this, was like,
right.
We're just go, and we're getting results, but you just feel overwhelmed or almost burned out at times, because you're trying to take on so much and make so much happen. So a lot of people that listen to Author Spotlight, a lot of people that listen to Thrive After Sports, these are folks with type A personalities. These are go-getters. Right. These are people who are constantly on the go, making stuff happen like we're talking about. What advice can you share to those people just about how they can take some time to recharge, refresh, not allow themselves to burn out like you and I have both done from time to time? But what advice can you give to those people just while they're on the go, how they can implement self-care into what they're doing as well?
Yeah, that's awesome. So I actually have a bunch of resources around this topic in general. So I'll tell you 3 really quickly. I published a video on my YouTube channel the other day about how to find peace in your hectic workday. So if you're that type A personality, for example, and you're currently an athlete and you are in practices and you're traveling, or maybe you even have promotional deals and you have things where it's like, you're not in a space that you can say, hey coach, I'm going to take my 2 weeks vacation today. Like you can't really do that in the middle of your season, right? Or when you have like other contracts and stuff. So that's about finding, that video kind of goes over some ways to find peace. So it might be as simple as starting your day with very specific affirmations. I do that to help myself create balance just right from the get-go in that day, and just saying things like, I'm claiming today as a peaceful work day. So even if it's crazy, I'm claiming that it's even if I'm like, I don't have 5 seconds to myself, I'm going to claim this peaceful feeling, right? So that's one example. Another thing, if you're really on the go, is I just released this recently, but it's a membership. It's a subscription membership. It's called Bucketheads. And basically what it is it's an on-the-go mental wellness training in short bursts, So you're going to get things like daily affirmation text messages in the morning, weekly power minute journal prompts, access to a meditation library, access to even more worksheets. So if you like the stuff in the book, there's way more of that in this membership. So and it's only like $7 a month. So you can try it free for 7 days. So 7 days, sorry. So those are things that you can get. And I'm not the only one that offers these resources, but if you want to check those resources out, those are things that you can definitely do. But the point is that to know and understand and decide for yourself, whatever tools you decide to use, decide for yourself that I can be type A and still live with peace and still live with clarity. And it doesn't mean that I have to be sitting on the top of a mountain at a retreat, completely disconnected, right? And meditating in order to get there. Like I can have both lifestyles. I just have to learn and discipline myself to learn how to claim that.
Woo, I love that. That's some wise words right there, Misty. I love that. I'm claiming today as a peaceful work day. That one hit me right there in the chest. I'm really desperate working throughout the day. Like that's major right there. I really like that one. That's strong. And that's all the type of stuff that people can expect to get from you through you said it's called Bucketheads, right?
Yeah. So actually if you go to my website, which is Purposeful, like the words purpose and soul put together, purposefulathletics.com/resources. You can see all the different resources I have. So free stuff, you can see the link to that membership is there. If you wanted to check that out, give it a try for free. Or if you just want to go directly to the membership, you just go to purposefulathletics.com/membership and it'll take you right there and you can opt in really quickly to give it a try. So, but I have lots of those resources, some free on the site.
Yeah, and for anybody listening, I just want everyone to understand, obviously you'll be able to get tremendous value just from all of the free resources that Misty offers, but you also want to invest. It's not even the type of situation where, some people keep things like behind the paywall. Like Misty, if you look at any of Misty's content, all the free stuff, it's all her best stuff, right? But where investing comes into play, yeah, I'm just speaking the truth. But so I've been absorbing Misty's free stuff since we connected, but I invested in the book. I invested in spending time doing coaching with her because I understand that in order to get that one-on-one time or to get it just brings a different level of accountability. Can you speak to that, Misty? Because I feel like once you invest, we know how important it is to invest in all the best trainers and invest in the right foods and stuff. But investing in our mental, emotional, our spiritual well-being, I think a lot of athletes, and once again, not to generalize, but sometimes we can be, and I'm speaking from experience too, I was hesitant to invest in that side. But can you just speak to the importance of investing in yourself as far as mental and spiritual and emotional wellness as well?
Right. So I think what I'll say about that is that number one, no one can take care of you except for you. And it just can't happen, right? And so we see, and this is an example I use a lot of times, I think I even use it in the book, but you can see, so let's say you, God forbid, but let's say you tear an ACL, people are going to see that and that you're hurt because you're physically hurt and they can see that. And they're going to say, oh, okay, yeah, you got to have surgery. Okay, now I got to invest in training and therapy and getting back, blah, 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 blah. And that's totally acceptable, right? Because it's something that people can see happening. But it's a lot easier to mask your emotions, to bury them down deep, especially when you're thinking this is going to affect, I can't let this throw me off my game. So I'm not going to go there. I'm just going to bury this, put it in the back of my mind, and I'll deal with it later. And then what happens is, guess what? It's going to explode one way or another. It's just going to happen, right? Everyone has different stories about this, but I've had several myself. So, it might be, it might just come out one day in anger, just explosive anger, because you have to just let that energy out. And it might be, a million different things. It might be I had instances in my life where my body started breaking down and doing really weird things. And doctors were like, oh, it's because you're stressed. I was like, excuse me? I was like, but I am fine. What are you talking about? And so, I think when you think about those things, that number one, the only person that can take care of you is you, which means you're the one that has to be honest with yourself about what's going on and what you need to do to take care of yourself, right? And number two, if you're a human, which you are, because none of us are robots, you're going to have emotions. That's inevitable. There's no way around that. So you might as well learn how to deal with that in a healthy way.
Right, exactly it. Yeah, that's huge. And I wanted to ask you, because you're already doing so many great things, providing so many great resources. What is the future for Misty Buck? Like, what is the future of Purposeful Athletics? I know we're talking about more books coming out, but like, where do you see long-term vision or even short-term vision? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so I'm really, I will say that 2020, as difficult as it has been, I've been blessed that it's made me really focus in on this more than ever. And I went ahead and I got the book published this year. I just last week released the membership, which I had been working on and off for like 2 years with this membership, like putting that together. And so I think that, and now I have the YouTube channel where I'm going to be posting more content there and just sort of, you know, like doing things more and more. And so I think the future is really in focusing on, for me personally, I want to work more with pro athletes, because I think that, at least what I have seen, is that, you know, the college athletics, there's, and again, this is always up to the individual to go get help with these resources, right? But there's so many resources out there. There's so many amazing organizations. Like, shout out to people like Victoria over at Hidden Opponent, who are doing huge things for student athletes. Marcus Alston with Alston for Athletes. They're doing amazing things for student athletes. And I feel though that the pro athletes, like you're getting guys like Jack Prescott and, you know, whoever else coming out and saying like, oh yeah, you know, like this has been really tough for me. But I think the average pro athlete may not have that resource. And so I want to be really focused on being that resource for these guys who are even at the top of their game, even more scrutinized, even more pressure, and help them understand, you know, it's okay to have emotions, and this is how, you know, we deal with those.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point you bring up, because I felt like it was funny when I was first starting to work with former collegiate athletes. I felt like the professional players, especially the NBA, more so than the NFL, but the professional players, I was like, oh, they have all the resources they need. And then as time has gone by, you see a lot of resources popping up for collegiate athletes. And I feel like the balance has kind of shifted, like you said. So I think that that's great that you're leaning into helping the professional players more, especially with you, what you do from a mental health perspective, because I was having a conversation with Joe Hawley the other day, and he just started like a community, like a group for male former professional athletes. And that was one of the things that he was saying, like you're saying, Missy, there's these groups for, you know, financial education, or, you know, they do externships and all that stuff, which is all important, but where are the resources for, you know, the holistic approach, the mental and the spiritual well-being, which is what you offer. So I think that's great that's kind of what you're leading into. And you already answered the question a little bit, but I still would like to hear, just like, when you leave this earth, right? And I know you still got 70 years, 80 years left, you know what I'm saying? Let's not.
Ooh, I'm turning 40 in a few months. I don't know about that, Taj, but let's say.
Hey, Misty, the wonders of modern medicine, you're going to be around here. We might still be messing around 70 years from now, still out going for jogs and stuff.
I hope we'll be like holograms doing podcasts, right? Like,
hey, that would be pretty cool too.
Like Coachella type thing.
Coachella Tupac.
yeah, that'll be us.
Yeah, that's right. I'm still going to stick with it though. I'm going to say 70 years. All right. So you still got like 70 plus years on this planet. Like, what do you want your legacy to be when it's all said and done? When you do leave this earth, what do you want people to say? How do you want people to remember Misty Buck?
I want to, that's a hard question because it's so ego driven, I guess. But I think for me, on a personal level, spiritually, I will know and feel like my job has been complete. And that's why I've stayed on this path and I'm really pursuing it, because there's a reason that I've gone through the things that I've gone through. And I want to know that I took those things and I took these God-given talents that God has given me every day, Taj, every single day. When I say my prayers, the last thing that I say to God is, thank you for my gifts and show me how to use my gifts. Point me in the right direction. Who can I help? And so that's really, really my goal is to, it's not to say like, oh, okay, like when I die, I want there to be, you know, something in the Hall of Fame of whatever with my head bust on it, you know, like I don't really think about those kind of things, but more of like, if I pass away and, or whenever that happens, that it doesn't matter how many people, but that through living and speaking my truth and putting it out there, that I've impacted other people's lives in a way, or at least started them on a journey and on a trajectory towards their own spiritual and personal growth. Because to me, the spiritual part is so huge.
Yeah, that's amazing, Misty. You've already done a great job of doing that, you know.
Thank you.
And please just tell people how they can get the book. You've already talked about the website, Purposeful Athletics, but
yeah,
talk about where they can connect with you on social media, where they can get the book, all that kind of good stuff.
All right. So the book, Athlete Mental Health Playbook, that's available on Amazon. All of my social media, yeah, there we go. We both have them. My social media handles, you can find me at the Misty Buck. So you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I'm all there. I'm on TikTok, but I don't do a whole lot there. So if you find me there, you might be a little disappointed. I don't get to that as much as I should. So anyways, but that's my handle. But if you go to purposefulathletics.com, you're going to find all that stuff there. You can sign up for this free newsletter that Taj has been talking about that I send out every week. You can find all these other resources there, ways to connect with me. If you want to send me a personal message, you can do it there or on social. But those are the best ways to do it.
Awesome. And then before we wrap up, Misty, can you just give some parting advice for that current athlete, that former athlete, that entrepreneur, that person who, you know, they've been beat up by 2020, like some of us have, and they're just kind of struggling right now. Just any parting words of wisdom you can share with those people right now?
Yeah, you know, I saw somebody post the other day, and I apologize, the name is slipping me right now, but I saw somebody post something, and it was just like, wow. And it's been over a week, and I'm still thinking about it. And it was something very simple. If you're reading this, or in this case, if you're listening to this, you've already survived 100% of your toughest days.
That's fire right there. I love that.
Right? I wish I wrote it. I didn't, but it just is like, duh, like, hello, like, you know what I mean? Like, just, wow, if I could really put things in that perspective, that's fuel to move forward.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I love that. Like,
You're
we're
welcome.
Still here. We're still here. Like you said, if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, you made it. Congratulations.
You made it. Every day you wake up, you know what? You made it through yesterday. Cool. You know, like, that's awesome. Congrats. And I think that's one thing too. We get so focused on the things that we don't have, or that we haven't done, or the things that are going wrong. And then what happens is those feelings amplify. So when you can focus on celebrating what you have done and giving yourself a pat on the back, and maybe not being so tough on yourself, and saying, and even when you have feelings that you're not comfortable with, saying, okay, I'm still going to own the fact that I'm feeling this, and then you can let it go. But just being real with yourself, but not always hard on yourself, being congratulating yourself, you know what?
Yeah.
Good job for that today.
That's right.
And that's hard to do. Sometimes that's a lot harder to do, right? But man, it feels a lot better.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, that's a beautiful share. Thank you for sharing that, Misty. And before we get out of here, I just want to acknowledge you for all the work you're doing, all the work you're continuing to do, all the work you will do in the future, just for being a light in this world. Not only the book, but the content, the coaching, for the impact you've had on my life. I mean, you know, I was almost breaking down, getting emotional the last time we spoke when you were coaching me. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you for coming on and sharing with us today. I know there's going to be tremendous value derived from this episode, from everything you shared. So thank you for coming on Author Spotlight and Thrive After Sports. And we got to have you on again sometime for sure.
Oh my God, I will love that anytime. And I want to thank you too. You know, I want to give you a shout out, give you flowers, whatever the term is these days, for all the stuff that you're doing too. You know, I know, like, we're all just trying to get to the next level. And I think you said it perfectly. Just be a light. So thank you for being a light too.
Absolutely, Misty. Thank you. I appreciate that. I received that. I definitely received that.
All right, good.
All right, everybody. This has been another great episode of Author Spotlight. with Misty Buck. If you're tuned in on Thrive After Sports, thank you for tuning in there. Thank you, Misty, for coming on and sharing. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye, guys.